A family is devastated by the death of their daughter, and now the Montgomery County, Alabama Sheriff's Office has launched an investigation into the death of Alabama State University student Gennia Grimes.
Grimes was a proud member of the Alabama State University Honeybees dance team.
When I say up here, it ain't down here. It was never down here. Like
it never came down here, baby.
Hey y'all.
It's my little sister. Good.
I'm gonna tell this shit, so you ready?
Uh-oh. You heard it here first.
Again, make sure you go. One. Go ahead, Sean. Ready? And 5. And 6. And 5. 6. Take off. Watch. Ha. I feel ready, like, trying to go.
Yeah.
On the morning of March 27th, 2025, a 21-year-old woman was shot in the head in a car on Highway 80 East in Montgomery County, Alabama. The man driving the car called his mother before he called for help. He filmed 2 videos on Snapchat while she was still alive. The second video showed a gun placed on her shoulder. His voice said, "This girl shot herself." 8 days later, he was charged with capital murder. Her name was Gennia Grimes. She was studying criminal justice. She wanted to become a lawyer. She never made it to class that morning. If this is the first time you're hearing Gennia's name, tell us where you are watching from in the comments right now. This story traveled through Atlanta, through Montgomery, through every campus that lost a piece of itself when she died. I want to know how far it's still reaching. And if you believe every victim deserves to have their story told in full, stay with me. Because what happened on that highway, and what Rogers Mloud Jr. did in the minutes after it, is one of the most documented cases of a man destroying himself with his own evidence that I have ever covered. Here is what we know about that morning. Gennia and Rogers were driving from Auburn to Montgomery. She needed to get back to Alabama State University for a class. A normal Thursday morning, a drive they had likely made before. Somewhere on Highway 80 East, in the Waugh community of Pike Road, the car stopped. When first responders arrived at the scene near a convenience store off the highway, they found Gennia Grimes in the passenger seat with a gunshot wound to the head. She was still alive. Medics treated her at the scene and airlifted her to Baptist South Hospital in Montgomery. She died from her injuries a short time later. Rogers Mloud Jr. was in the car. He was the only other person in the car. And the story he gave to Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies was this. Gennia had become overwhelmed during the drive. She was distressed about financial problems. She reached into the center console where he kept a loaded gun and she shot herself. That was the story. Investigators began pulling it apart almost immediately. Not because they had a witness, not because someone had seen something from the road, but because of what they found when they looked at Rogers Mloud Jr.'s phone. He had been filming. The first Snapchat video, the one he kept for himself and did not send to anyone, showed Gennia bleeding in the passenger seat. No gun visible, just Gennia, bleeding. While he held the camera, he had not called 911 yet. The second video was different. In this one, a gun had been placed on Gennia's shoulder, and over the footage, in his own voice, Rogers Mloud Jr. narrated what he needed people to believe. This girl shot herself. He sent that video to his mother. Then he sent text messages to his family. Then he called his mother. And then somewhere in that sequence of filming and staging and messaging, he finally dialed 911. Let that order sit for a moment. She had been shot in the head. She was still alive. And the priority, the first instinct, was not to get help to her as fast as possible. It was to document, to stage, to build the story before the authorities arrived. The sheriff's office later described the situation in 5 words that said everything. The evidence wasn't linking up. And it wasn't. Because beyond the videos, beyond the staging, the physical evidence contradicted his account at the most basic level. Gennia Grimes was right-handed. The gunshot wound was on the left side of her body. There is no version of his story that survives those 2 sentences. A right-handed woman in emotional distress, reaching for a gun in a center console, does not shoot herself on the left side of her head. The wound placement alone made the suicide narrative anatomically impossible. And her cousin Jasmine, who knew her better than almost anyone, said something that removed the last trace of doubt. Gennia wasn't just unfamiliar with guns. She was terrified of them. That is not a small detail. That is the detail that tells the entire story. A 21-year-old woman who was terrified of firearms did not reach into a center console and shot herself in the head on the left side of her body, while her right hand was her dominant hand. She was shot. And the man who shot her spent the minutes afterwards making sure his phone told a different version of what happened, before he made a single call to get her help. 8 days later, on April 5th, 2025, Rogers Mloud Jr. was arrested and charged with capital murder. He was held without bond. The evidence, as the sheriff said, wasn't linking up. It never does when the person who committed the crime also filmed it. Before we talk about what Rogers Mloud Jr. did, before we talk about the phone, the videos, the lies, you need to know who was in that car. Because Gennia Grimes was not just a victim in a case file. She was not just a headline. She was a person, and she deserves to be introduced properly. Her full name was Gennia Grimes. Everyone called her Gennia. She was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Ben Hill area, Southwest Side. She graduated from Mays High School in 2021, and from the moment she walked across that stage, she already knew exactly where she was going. Alabama State University. Criminal justice major. Future lawyer. Future FBI agent. She had a plan. She had always had a plan, and she was executing it with everything she had. But Gennia was not just a student. She was a performer. At Alabama State University, she danced with the Honeybees. That is the university dance team, and it is not a casual commitment. It is a high-level, high-visibility performance group that represents the school at the highest level. Gennia earned her place on that team, and she stood out from the moment she arrived. She had a name in those circles. Purple Doll. She earned that name because everywhere she went, she brought energy and color and life with her. Her dance videos had been going viral since she was still in high school. By the time she was a junior at ASU, she had been featured on Access Hollywood for her dancing. Access Hollywood. A 21-year-old college student from Atlanta. Her mother, Angela, said it plainly, and she meant every word of it. She was a superstar. Everybody who knew her knew that. And then in 24, Gennia became a mother. She gave birth to a baby boy, Rogers McLeod III, 9 months old at the time of her death. A lot of young women in that situation pause, take time out, step back from the plan. Gennia went straight back to class. She carried a 3.0 grade point average. She kept her graduation date locked in for August 2025. She kept dancing. She kept showing up. The night before she died, she was up until 3:30 a.m. in the morning rehearsing. There was a performance the next day. She was not going to miss it. She never got there. That is, who was in that car on the morning of March 27th. A 21-year-old woman who had just had a baby and gone straight back to school. A dancer. A criminal justice student. A daughter her mother called a superstar. A young woman who was up at 3:30 a.m. in the morning because she loved what she did, and she refused to let anything slow her down. She was heading back to Montgomery for class. That was all she was doing. Trying to get to her future. There is something that has stayed with a lot of people who followed this case closely. Gennia was studying criminal justice because she wanted to become a lawyer. She wanted to spend her career standing up for people who could not stand up for themselves. She believed in the system. She was building her life around it. She became a victim inside the very system she was studying. She never got to graduate in August. She never got to sit the bar exam. She never got to tell her son herself who she was and what she stood for. Alabama State University held a balloon release for her. A campus stood still. Her mother lost her best friend. A little boy lost the only mother he will ever have. And somewhere in Montgomery County, a man charged with capital murder was sitting in a detention facility because the evidence on his own phone told a story he could not talk his way out of. Gennia deserved so much more than that highway. She was Purple Doll. And the world was supposed to know that name for a very different reason. Nothing about March 27th happened without warning. That is the hardest part of this story. Not the crime itself, not the phone, not the videos. The hardest part is that the signs were there. They were visible. They were documented. And the people who loved Gennia saw them and hoped they were wrong. They were not wrong. Rogers Mloud Jr. and Gennia Grimes met at Alabama State University. He played football for the team. She danced with the honeybees, two young people in the same campus community who found each other and built something together over 2 years. By all accounts, the family welcomed him. Genna's mother, Angela, treated him like he was her own. He came to family events. He was part of the circle. He was the father of Genna's son. He was somebody they had decided to trust. That trust would cost them everything. Weeks before March 27th, something happened. Gennia found something on his phone. We do not know exactly what she found. That detail has not been fully disclosed publicly, but we know what happened next because her mother watched it unfold. Rogers got mad. Not uncomfortable, not apologetic, not willing to have a conversation about what she had seen. He got mad. And when Rogers Malau Jr. got mad, he did not just raise his voice. He reached for her things. He smashed her iPad. He destroyed her phone. He tried to break her television. Take a moment with that sequence. Not a punch, not a threat spoken out loud. He went for her devices, her iPad, her phone, her television, the things she used to communicate, the things she used to document, the things that connected her to the outside world and to the people who would have listened if she had reached out. Criminologists who study domestic violence homicide cases describe a specific pre-violence pattern that appears repeatedly across cases of this kind. It starts with communication and documentation. The abuser destroys the victim's ability to reach out, to record, to show someone what is happening inside the relationship. It is not random destruction, it is targeted. It removes the victim's tools before the situation escalates further. It is called the erasure pattern, and it showed up in Genna's story weeks before that highway. Her mother saw it. The family saw it. They worried. They watched. They hoped it was a phase. They hoped Rogers would settle. They hoped the arrival of a baby and the weight of new responsibility would change something in him. It did not change anything. What Rogers Malau Jr. showed Gennia and her family through those weeks was not a man going through a difficult moment. It was a man telling them exactly who he was. They just could not have known how far he was willing to go. Genna's mother, Angela, said something after all of this happened that every person watching this needs to carry with them. She said it simply. She did not dress it up. Anytime something is not right in your relationship, tell someone. Do not hold back. That advice did not come from nowhere. It came from watching her daughter stay quiet about things that should have been spoken out loud. It came from knowing that the warning signs existed and that silence gave them room to grow. If you are watching this right now and something in that sequence feels familiar, the destroyed phone, the smashed device, the anger that arrives not as words but as damage to your belongings, tell someone. Do not wait for it to make sense. Do not wait for it to get better on its own. It does not get better on its own. Gennia was a criminal justice student. She knew the law better than most people her age. And she still could not have predicted that a man who started with her iPad would end with a gun on a highway in Montgomery County. He did not start with a gun. He started with her iPad. And by the time he reached for something worse, Gennia was already running out of time to get away from it. 8 days. That is how long it took. From the morning of March 27th to the afternoon of April 4th, 2024, 8 days between the highway and the handcuffs, 8 days between the story Rogers Malau Jr. told deputies and the moment investigators decided they had heard enough. 8 days is not a long time to build a capital murder case. But Rogers Malau Jr. had done most of the work himself. When investigators began pulling the case apart, they did not start with forensic labs or expert witnesses or months of surveillance. They started with his phone, because his phone was where the story lived. Not the story he told deputies, the real story, the one he had recorded in real time on a highway in Montgomery County while Gennia Grimes was still alive in the seat beside him. The first video showed her bleeding. No gun in the frame, no evidence of what he claimed had happened, just Gennia and blood, and Rogers behind the camera choosing to document instead of dial. That video alone raised questions that his suicide narrative could not answer. But the second video removed all doubt. Investigators watched a recording in which Rogers Malau Jr. had placed a gun on Gennia's shoulder. He had positioned it deliberately. He had framed the shot, and then he had pressed record and narrated over the footage with his own voice. This girl shot herself. 5 words. Spoken clearly, calmly, by the man who had just shot the mother of his child on a highway in Alabama and was now standing over her building the explanation he planned to hand to law enforcement. He sent that video to his mother. He did not send it to 911. He did not send it to emergency services. He did not use those minutes to get help to Gennia faster. He sent it to his mother. And then he texted his family. And then he called his mother. And then he called 911. Sheriff Derek Cunningham of the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office described what investigators found when they looked at the totality of the evidence. He said it carefully, professionally. The evidence just was not linking up the way he described it. That sentence does a lot of work. What it means in plain language is this. Rogers Mloud Jr. told a story, the evidence told a different one, and the gap between those two versions was not a matter of interpretation or perspective or reasonable doubt. It was a matter of physics. Gennia Grimes was right-handed. The gunshot wound was on the left side of her body. A right-handed woman reaching into a center console in a state of emotional distress does not shoot herself on the left side of her head. That is not how the human body moves. That is not how that injury happens in the scenario he described. The wound placement made his story anatomically impossible before a single video was even shown to a jury. And then there was what her cousin Jasmine said. Gennia was not just unfamiliar with guns. She was terrified of them. Not cautious, not inexperienced, terrified. The woman Rogers Mloud Jr. claimed had reached into a console and shot herself was a woman who would not have willingly touched a firearm under any circumstance. The lie did not just collapse under the weight of the videos. It collapsed under the weight of who Gennia was. On April 4, 2025, Rogers Mloud Jr. was arrested. The charge was capital murder. He was taken into custody by Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies and transported to the Montgomery County Detention Facility, where he was held without bond. No bail, no release, no walking out while the family waited. The Montgomery County District Attorney's Office confirmed they were working the case alongside the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency's State Bureau of Investigation and the sheriff's investigators. This was not a small operation. Multiple agencies, multiple layers of evidence review, all of them pointing in the same direction. 3 days later, on April 7th, Rogers Mloud Jr. appeared before Judge Pamela Higgins for a preliminary hearing. Gennia Grimes' family sat in that courtroom. They had buried their daughter less than 2 weeks before. They had picked up a 9-month-old baby boy from the suspect's family. They had stood in a church and said goodbye to a 21-year-old woman who had been up at 3:30 inches the morning, rehearsing the night before she died. And now they sat in a courtroom and watched the man responsible sit before a judge and face the evidence. An investigator from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office took the stand and walked through what the evidence showed. The drive from Auburn to Montgomery, the gun in the center console, the story Rogers gave about Gennia becoming inconsolable over financial issues, the videos on his phone, the staging, the voice on the recording, the calls and texts made before 911 was dialed. Judge Higgins heard all of it. She found that the evidence was strong enough to send the case to a grand jury. The defense withdrew a motion for bond. Rogers Mloud Jr. stayed behind bars. There is something that needs to be said about the technology in this case. Rogers Mloud Jr. is 20 years old. He grew up with a phone in his hand. He knew how Snapchat worked. He knew how to frame a video. He knew how to send a file and type a message and construct a version of events before anyone official arrived on the scene. What he did not know is that the platform he used to build his story also preserved it. Snapchat has a reputation for disappearing content, but the videos investigators found did not disappear. They were on his phone, saved, accessible, waiting. Every frame of what he did in those minutes was sitting in his own device when investigators came looking. He did not create an alibi. He created a document, and that document is what built the capital murder case against him. Alabama State University held a balloon release for Gennia. The honeybees stood on the campus where she had danced and trained and pushed herself through 3:30 a.m. rehearsals, and they released balloons into the sky for a woman who should have been preparing for her August graduation. Her mother Angela spoke publicly and asked for something simple. She asked for the truth to come out. It came out 8 days after her daughter died. It came out because Rogers Mloud Jr. filmed it himself. A GoFundMe was set up for two purposes: to cover Gennia's funeral expenses, and to bring her son, Rogers McLeod III, home so he could say goodbye to his mother, a 9-month-old baby. Too young to understand what had happened, too young to know that the woman who had been up at 3:30 inches the morning, making sure she was ready for her performance, was never coming back. He will grow up without her. He will reach an age where he is old enough to search her name, and what he finds when he does that search needs to be the truth, not the story his father told on a highway in Montgomery County. The truth. Who Gennia was, what she was building, what she was taken from. Gennia Grimes was studying criminal justice because she believed the law worked. She was 21 years old, and she still had that kind of faith. She wanted to become the lawyer who stands up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. She became a victim inside the very system she was preparing to serve. The law stood up for her anyway. 8 days, his own phone, and a sheriff who said the evidence was not linking up. Sometimes, the person who commits the crime also films it. And when they do, the truth does not need a witness. It just needs someone to press play. Share this video. Not for the views. For Gennia, for her son, who will one day be old enough to search her name. For her mother, who called her a superstar and was right about every word of it. Make sure what that little boy finds when he searches is the truth. And make sure it travels further than the lie did. Gennia Grimes was Purple Doll. She was a honeybee. She was a criminal justice student and a daughter and a mother and a friend. She deserved to walk across that stage in August. She deserved so much more than that highway.